going to be talking about a very special figure in the Talmud. His name was Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Meir Baal Hanes. Maybe you've been to his gravesite, his kever, in Tiberias, in the north of Israel on the Sea of Galilee. Rebbe Meir is buried there. That was where he lived, in Tiberias. And he was known as Rebbe Meir Baal Hanes. He was able to perform different miracles for people. So he was the third generation of Tanaim, the authors of the Mishnah. He was the third generation. He was a student, one of the closest students of Rebbe Akiva. He was appointed the Chacham of the Sanhedrin during his time. In fact, he was so respected as a sage that during one of the periods of oppression, of the Romans oppressing the Jewish people in the land of Israel, where they forbade the establishment of the Sanhedrin, of the high court, they actually sent him to Turkey, where he was the one who was able to declare leap years to protect the integrity of the Jewish calendar. Now, Rebbe Meir is considered so central to the Mishnah that any time there is a statement in the Mishnah and it doesn't say who was the author of that statement, we say there's a rule that a stam Mishnah is Rebbe Meir. A Mishnah that is unattributed, we assume was written by Rebbe Meir. So as I mentioned, Rebbe Meir lived during the Roman occupation of the land of Israel. And as such, he went through a lot of self-sacrifice in order to continue learning and teaching Torah. In fact, the Romans, like the Greeks, made a lot of different punishments if a person would be found either learning Torah or teaching Torah. The greatness of Rebbe Meir, perhaps, is best summed up that Rebbe Yehuda HaNasi, the compiler of the Mishnah and the leader of the Jewish people during his time period, said that his own greatness he attributed to seeing the back of Rebbe Meir. Such was the greatness of Rebbe Meir. So that's a little bit of a background of Rebbe Meir. Now we're going to get a little involved, perhaps, in his life story. So one of the first things we know about Rebbe Meir comes from a Gemara in Gittin. The Gemara in Gittin discusses the story of how the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, the second temple. We're familiar maybe a little bit with the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa and sending a message to the Caesar, all these very interesting things that happened during that time period. Now, at a certain point, it says that the Caesar, whose name was Nero, in the Gemara calls him Neron Caesar, so Neron Caesar, Nero the Caesar, he went out against the Jews. He sent out an attack against Jerusalem. And he wanted to be able to determine, according to sorcery, will he be successful in his attack against Jerusalem. So first, he shot an arrow towards the east, and it fell in Jerusalem. He shot an arrow to the west. Again, it fell in Jerusalem. He ended up shooting an arrow in all different directions. Each time, the arrow fell in Jerusalem. And he determined in this way of sorcery that his attack against Jerusalem would be successful. So Nero was planning on destroying the Jewish people and destroying the temple. He did now a second test. It was the way of the sorcerers. One of the things they would do is they would actually ask a Jewish school child to recite, what verse did you learn in school today? And based on the verse, the petitioner would know what's going to be my future. What's going to happen? So he went to schoolboy, and the boy said, He quoted a verse in Ezekiel, that says, I will take my revenge against Edom, which is Rome, through the agency of my people Israel. Meaning to say that God is telling Ezekiel, through a prophecy, that he's planning to take revenge against Rome through the Jewish people. So Nero, again, the emperor of Rome, realized, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of God's anger by attacking the Jewish people. So he thought to himself, what should I do in order to protect myself? He said, I better abandon this whole attack against the Jewish people. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to abdicate my throne. I'm going to run away. In fact, I'm going to convert to Judaism. So yes, according to the Gemara in Gittin, the Emperor Nero converted to Judaism. One of the cruelest people as an emperor actually converted to Judaism. I was told this historically, apparently the historians say that Nero passed away, and I saw the commentators deal with this, and they said it could be they didn't know what happened to him, so they assumed he committed suicide, or they knew what happened to him, but it would have been too big of a shame for the Roman Empire, so they made up a story of what happened. In any case, this is what the Talmud says, that Nero converted to Judaism. He refused to go through with his war against the Jewish people. He converted to Judaism. And it says that Rebbe Meir was a descendant of Emperor Nero. Why did he have this tremendous merit of having a descendant like Rebbe Meir, who became one of the greatest sages of all time? So it says, just as Nero refused to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, which brought light into the world, he was given a reward that he should have a Torah scholar of such magnitude come from him, since Torah also enlightens the world. So we see that Nero, the emperor of Rome, became a Jew and became the ancestor of the Tana, the great sage Rebbe Meir. So that's a little bit about the familial relationship that Rebbe Meir had to the Emperor Nero. Now, I mentioned earlier that Rebbe Meir was one of the foremost students of Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Akiva, we know, had 24,000 students, and during the time between Passover and Shavuot, 24,000 of them passed away in a terrible plague, and Rebbe Akiva was trying to rebuild a group of students, and he ended up having 5 students. He went from 24,000 students to 5 students. And one of these students was Rebbe Meir. Now, Rebbe Meir was a very young man when he became a student of Rebbe Akiva, to the extent that it says that Rebbe Meir had a hard time following Rebbe Akiva's class. He couldn't keep up with Rebbe Akiva's logic, all the information that he would bring into his class. And he couldn't understand, he couldn't follow, he couldn't keep up. So he took a break and he went to learn at a different rabbi's yeshiva, Rebbe Yishmael. And after a few years at Rebbe Yishmael's yeshiva, he felt ready, okay, I can go back now to be a student of Rebbe Akiva. Says that he became so brilliant in his learning, or he may have become such a brilliant Torah scholar, that he was able to take either side in a halachic debate, He was able to argue both sides, and it says that he was able to take these two sides. It was as if he was taking two mountains and grinding them against each other. The way to describe someone with a tremendous depth of logic in their Talmudic studies is that you call him an oiker harim, a uprooter of mountains. Because when a person builds a logical edifice to now undercut that and take it over, it's called uprooting a mountain. So Rebbe Meir had attained such a reputation for his logical precision that he was known as an uprooter of mountains, an oiker harim. Now, one of the famous chapters of the life of Rebbe Meir, perhaps we'll actually do another shir about this, because it deserves its own shir, is his relationship to Elisha ben Avuya, who was also known as Acher, who actually became an apostate. He went totally off the path of Judaism. And it says that even after this all happened, even after he left the path of Judaism, Rebbe Meir still was his student. Rebbe Meir didn't leave his side. He's remained a student. And it says, like a pomegranate, you take the fruit and you leave the waste. He was able to take the good parts from Acher, take his Torah, and leave his bad traits and his apostasy and not imbue that into himself. But I think that is perhaps something that we're going to, maybe a future shir, we'll do a little more about Acher, because it's a very interesting topic. Acher, again, is Elisha ben Avuya. He was one of the greatest sages who ultimately ended up going off of the path of Torah and becoming an apostate. And again, Rebbe Meir was his student and remained his student even after this whole episode. So perhaps that'll be a future class coming your way. So interestingly enough, it says about Rebbe Meir that Rebbe Akiva gave him rabbinical ordination, yet he was such a young person at that time that none of his colleagues respected him as a fellow rabbi. So it was only later in his life that he actually received an ordination that was respected by the rest of the sages, this time from Rebbe Yossi. Now, one of the things we'll go into now, part of the title of the class, was Rebbe Meir's outstanding wife. Her name was Bruya, and she herself was known to be a formidable Torah scholar. Perhaps you're familiar, you've seen stories about Bruya, but her wisdom was actually legendary. She was a daughter of Hananiah ben Tradion, one of the great Talmudic sages before Rebbe Meir, who himself, he died in sanctification of God's name. We actually tell the story when we read the 10 martyrs during Yom Kippur and during Tisha B'Av, that the Romans, when they killed Rebbe Hananiah ben Tradion, they burnt him alive and they put the fleece, the wool, over his heart so that he would stay alive longer. So he, of course, was a tremendous saint. And his daughter also was considered a tremendous saint and a Torah scholar, Bruya. Now, she was known for her very sharp lines. One time, she was on the road, and Rebbe Yossi, another sage, was passing by, and he asked Bruya, "What's the way to Lod, one of the towns in the land of Israel?" And she actually took him to task. She said, "You didn't have to say, 'What's the way to Lod?' You could have just asked me, 'Where's Lod?'" And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says that you should minimize how much you speak to another person's wife. So therefore, you could have said less words to me and conveyed the same question. And therefore, she felt it appropriate to take him to task for this lapse. Another example of her sharp remarks. There was once a student learning in the study hall, and he wasn't learning out loud. He was learning quietly in an undertone. And she said, "You think that you're going to be able to retain any of the Torah that you learn if you learn so softly? When a person learns Torah, they should learn with energy and animation." Another example, one time a tzaddik, one of the people of the Sadducee sect during this time period in the land of Israel, they denied the validity of the oral Torah, of the Mishnah and the Gemara. They denied the legitimacy of the oral Torah. So they didn't follow many of the laws that we follow as part of Judaism. They denied. So they were considered a heretical sect. They didn't buy into the authority of rabbinic Judaism. So one time, one of these Sadducees started a debate with her, and she was able to deflect all of his questions and show him that he was really a tremendous fool. If anyone wants to see that Gemara, it's in Brachos, Daf Yud, Amud Aleph, 10a. Now, Bruya was respected for her advice that she would give. In fact, Rebbe Meir himself gained through her wisdom. There's a Gemara also in Brachos, and it says, there was once these people who lived in Rebbe Meir's neighborhood. They were called Hanhu Biryone. These Biryone people. That's what they called. They were called. They were very crude, not a very high class type of people. And they were Jewish people, but they weren't really such a dignified people. And they caused Rebbe Meir a lot of difficulty in life. They made his life miserable. They would harass him and do all sorts of things, making his life difficult. So Rebbe Meir prayed for divine compassion and prayed that these people should die. That was his prayer. He said, these people should die. They're harassing me so much. I don't have any peace in my life from them. I have no rest from them. I have no other recourse other than to pray for their demise. So Bruya caught wind of her husband's plan, of the prayers that he said, and she of course realized that such a prayer would be effective. And she said to her husband, that's not the way. We shouldn't pray that a sinner should pass away. What we should pray is that sin should end. That the Yetzer Hara, the influence of the Yetzer Hara over these people should be no more. Therefore, don't pray that these people should pass away. Pray that their desire to sin should end. And indeed, that's what happened. Rebbe Meir prayed that these people, the Biryonim, that they should no longer be influenced towards sinning. And in fact, that's what happened. In fact, they became Bali Tshuva, they did repentance. Now, a few more examples of Bruya's wisdom. It says on a certain occasion, she learned 300 halachas from 300 different rabbis in a single day. It's a lot of learning in one day. In fact, her opinions in halacha are actually spoken about in the Talmud. One last story, her emunah, her faith in Hashem, was legendary. One of the famous stories that occur is that one Shabbat, Rebbe Meir was giving a class in the synagogue. And while he was out giving the class, Rebbe Meir's two small sons, passed away. A very big tragedy for him and for his wife. And Bruya wanted to somehow lessen the pain for Rebbe Meir. So when he came home, she had already sort of hidden them underneath a sheet. And when Rebbe Meir asked, where are my sons? She said, oh, they went out. They went to the study hall. They'll be back soon. He had Shalshudis. He prayed. He came back. He made Havdalah. And he asked again, where are my children? So she asked Rebbe Meir a question. She said, I have a halacha question. What's the law? Someone gave me a pikadon. They deposited an item with me for safekeeping. And now they're coming back to reclaim their item. Do I have to give it to them? So Rebbe Meir, of course, said, of course you have to give it to them. It's their item. If they ask you for it back, then you have to give it to them. You're just the guardian. You don't own that item. You're just the guardian. So of course you should return it. So with this, she then showed Rebbe Meir the children who had passed away. And he, of course, broke down. He was very, very upset. And he said, he referred to them as my teachers. He lamented that they passed away. And she said, Bruya said to her husband, she said, my husband, didn't you just tell me, though, that if you are a guardian for someone else's item, that you have to give it back without a fight? You have to give it back to the master, the owner of the item. So too here, in the situation, God gave us an item for safekeeping, these two children, and we took care of them. And now the master, he demanded them back. So in this way, she comforted her husband and let him see that really even the negative things in our life are from a divine decree, with all for our benefit, even though we may not be able to see it. So that's some of the wisdom of Rebbe Meir's wife, Bruya. Now back to Rebbe Meir, just a few stories about Rebbe Meir. And then maybe we'll quote perhaps some of his ideas, some of his teachings. So there's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. I mentioned earlier that Rebbe Meir lived at the time of the Roman occupation. So unfortunately, one of the things the Romans did was that they captured people and they used them as slaves and different things. And it happened that Rebbe Meir's sister-in-law, again, the sister of his wife Bruya, was taken and she was sold into a brothel. Obviously a very demeaning and humiliating thing for the daughter of a saint like Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan. So this woman was in a brothel, and Bruya asked her husband, Rebbe Meir, to go save my sister, get her out of this brothel. It's not a fitting place for her to be. Take her home. So Rebbe Meir said, okay. He brought along a lot of money, a lot of gold, and he said, if she's free if she hasn't done anything wrong, if she's protected her sanctity, her kedusha, her tznius, if she was able to protect herself, then a miracle is going to occur. So he went into this brothel. You can imagine a very holy-looking rabbi disguising himself and going into a brothel dressed as a Roman horseman. And he goes and he requests this woman's services. And she said, no, I can't. The way of women is upon me. I'm sorry, not right now. He said, no, it's okay, I'll wait. She said, no, there's other women here. They're nicer looking than me. You can probably, enjoy one of them instead. So he said, I see from this that she made an effort to protect her sanctity. I see that she kept herself to a high standard, and therefore a miracle is going to occur for her. So he went to the guard of this brothel, and he said, please, release this woman, I'll pay you, you could use the money I give you as a bribe to pay the Roman authorities, whoever you're going to need to pay. The guard was a little nervous to do this. He said, don't worry. If anyone comes for you, you'll just say, Elokai de Meir Aneni. Maybe you guys have heard this before. You say, Elokai de Meir Aneni, the God of Meir, answer me. Elokai, the God of Meir, Aneni, answer me. So if they come for you, you'll just say that phrase. The guard still said, but how do I know this is really real? How do I know this is really a true thing? So Rebbe Meir took a clump of dirt and he threw it at a group of very intimidating looking dogs. And the dogs came and attacked. And Rebbe Meir said, Elokai de Meir Aneni. And the dogs retreated. So the guard was convinced and he let the woman go. He took the money. And of course, the Roman authorities said, where'd this lady go? He tried to bribe them. And it didn't work, and he was going to be executed. As he was taking out to be executed, finally he said, Elokai de Meir Aneni. He remembered what to say. And it says that they weren't able to execute him. Whatever happened, nothing worked. Of course, they asked, like, what's going on? Why are we not able to execute you? So he told them the story of Rebbe Meir coming. And by now, Rebbe Meir was a wanted man. So Rebbe Meir had to flee the land of Israel and go elsewhere. So that was the story how Rebbe Meir was able, through self-sacrifice really, to save his sister-in-law from this brothel. And he showed the power of his merit in protecting this guard. So another thing that Rebbe Meir was known for was actually his working to foster peace between people. It happened once that Rebbe Meir would say he would give a class to a group of people every Friday night. And amongst the attendees of this class, there was a lady there, a married woman, and she enjoyed going to Rebbe Meir's classes. The only problem was that she would come back so late from the class, and her husband would be very resentful. And he resented that she would come back so late. He's like, I'm ready to eat dinner here. Like, where are you? No. Can everyone hear me? I just had some sort of errors come up on the computer. So I guess if anyone can't hear me, let me know. Okay, I'm assuming we're okay. So this woman went consistently to Rebbe Meir's classes, and it happened that her husband would get very upset. So the husband demanded, he said, whoever's class that is, I want you to spit at him. She said, how could I spit at him? He's a very important rabbi, a very holy sage. I'm not going to spit on him. That's ridiculous. Husband said, no, you need to spit on him. So Rebbe Meir was able to know this information. It says through his what's called Ruach HaKodesh, his divine inspiration, is able to know this information, this interaction that occurred between the husband and wife. And he sort of did a trick. He acted as if he had something in his face, in his eye, and he had some sort of eye ailment. And he told his woman, he says, look, I really need someone to spit in my face. Please spit in my face 7 times. And she was like, well, what are you talking about? How could I do that? It's, it's such a humiliation for you, a great sage, a great rabbi. I can't do that. He said, no, I insist. You're going to help me. It'll heal me. Spit in my face 7 times. So that's what this woman did eventually. He said, okay, now go home and tell your husband you spit in the rabbi's face 7 times. And as such, he was able to make peace between a married couple. Now, his students heard, and they were like very flabbergasted. How could you demean yourself so much? So he said, I have a proof that this is proper from the story of the Sota, that for the sake of marital peace, Hashem is willing to have his name erased. So maybe just one word about how Rebbe passed away. He passed away, as I said, he had to flee the Romans, and he had to flee from the land of Israel. So he lived somewhere outside of Israel, somewhere, it says, in Asia. And it says when he passed away, before he passed away, he said, put my body into the water. And he said it'll get back to the land of Israel somehow. He says we see from this that all the waters are connected and that eventually something that is drawn to holiness will be brought towards the land of Israel. So that's some of the few stories that we have from Rebbe Meir. There's a lot more. In fact, I think maybe I'll do a class perhaps on Acher one of these days. But perhaps just to tie it all together, a few of the things that we see from the holy sage Rebbe Meir. First was, of course, his incredible self-sacrifice for learning Torah, how he sacrificed his life for learning Torah, for the Jewish people to teach Torah in an era and a time that it was forbidden by Roman law to do so, at the expense, perhaps, of a person's life. In fact, there were the 10 martyrs we know about who, because they taught Torah, were killed in the sanctification of God's name. So Rebbe Meir also represented this. Another example, I mentioned at the beginning how Rebbe Meir was a descendant from the Emperor Nero, that because of Nero's heroic decision not to destroy the temple, he merited to an offspring, to a descendant, that would enlighten the entire world with Torah. So first we see the value of the temple. We should increase perhaps our prayer for the temple. And also the value of a person that comes from very far away from holiness, very far away from Hashem and Torah, and brings himself closer, that merit is a very strong one. The last thing that we see, we mentioned the story about Bruya and Rebbe Meir, their sons, and Bruya's very wise means that she conveyed this news to Rebbe Meir. And we in ourselves can be inspired by their level of emunah, that they were able to see something, a very, very negative thing, the death of 2 children, and they were able to be strong in the face of that tragedy and realize that this was the divine will, even if they couldn't understand how it was good for them, but in as much as it was the divine will, it was something that was for their benefit. So this is Rebbe Meir, one of the great sages of the Mishnah. He's mentioned over 300 times in the Mishnah. An incredible amount. Sorry, I should rephrase that. He's mentioned he's the third most frequently quoted sage in the Mishnah. And you can't go through any piece of Gemara without encountering Rebbe Meir. So hopefully this exposes us a little bit to one of our great sages. And I hope to see everyone again next week. And we'll see what we'll talk about next week. But thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope everyone had a nice Hanukkah. I think I've seen everyone since Hanukkah by now. And everyone have a nice night.